Hiya Steve, great to meet up with you as always at the range and do some work on your swing. Just a quick recap excuse me, on the key points that we discussed during your most recent session. Really it was all about tightening the radius of the swing, improving our ability to get back into flexion, get that feeling of going into the ground, and also just a little look at trying to control the rate. I mean, we're talking about going into the ground. One of the issues we discussed is that you're coming up out of the ground a little bit too quickly, so it's trying to control radius of the swing and sequencing the moves from P4 through to P8. And if we take a little look at what happens initially, you know, some stuff there that we've visited in the past where the elbows divide, the club rolls, we maintain too much forward bend early in the swing, and then the arms get a little bit long. From there, the tendency is to push up excuse me, too quickly from the ground. The left knee never really goes or flexes forward and down during the transition, so there's a quick push up. As we push up, we've got to start to flatten out the right wrist as we come through in order for the club to reach the golf ball. Problem with that is we can do it too much on occasion, and that can cause us to catch it heavy, so the elbows start to divide. And then the other thing we look at there is there's just a little bit too much of an extension on the way through, too much tucking, which is pretty typical of someone who's pushing up off the ground too much and too soon. So really we wanted to look at what was happening in the transition and try and improve our ability to, first of all, change direction, and then secondly, tighten up P6. So the first thing we did was we shortened P4. In shortening P4, we noticed that there was a slight improvement in the way the legs work. You can see here that the lead leg straightening quite quick, right leg never really getting back into flexion, and as we do that, the right heel's popping up in the air at P7. With a shorter backswing, so with less use of the arms, now we're going to go looking for a different source of power, and you can see that we go into the ground a little bit more. We keep the lead leg flexed a little bit more. We get the right knee back into flexion. What I would say is on this backswing, you need to get rid of some of this right knee bend at P4, so just allow the right. We want a short P4 with a straight right leg or a straightening right leg. But all in all, a little bit tidier, and at P7 the right heel's not popping up as much. There's been a little bit more of a turn during the day. So remember what we said, the act of flexing forward from 4 to 5 with the pelvis and the knees is initiating some rotation in the hips. So we can see that the hips are sliding, turning and extending rather than just sliding and extending like we see here on the top right. So not enough turn going on. And then the other thing we've done is we've placed the towel down about 8 inches behind the ball, and with a shorter P4, and attempting to miss this towel. This towel's folded so that it's about 1 inch high, and it's about 10 inches back of the ball. Any throw away now as we come through with the right hand, we'll start to hit the towel too soon. So it's just tightening the radius of the swing. And the other thing we can see here, because of the shorter P4, we get into that left knee more during the transition. So we've gone into the ground before pushing up. Upper centre translates forward a little bit on that. That was something that we sort of discussed and worked on during the session. You see the head's much more face down. It's much less tilted back as we come through, and if I just sync these two left hand swings up, we've got more shaft lean, better handle location, better left knee condition, better amount of tilt through the golf ball, and the arms coming through are starting to straighten up a little bit. That was the other thing we discussed, just working on them arms really straight on the way through, but a much tidier move from a shorter P4 to P6. Dramatically improved P7. We also then talked or discussed what was going on with the right hip as we came down or as we started down. We can see here on the top right there's a tendency for that hip to work sort of up and then start to turn. So it's that first move, and we see it here as well. There's a little move up. You can see that belt raising a little bit too soon. And you mentioned about getting that out of the system. It's one of your pet hates. You look at that and it doesn't really fill you with joy. The way we suggested approaching it was to actually try and reduce the effects this is going to have on the swing. Aesthetically, if you want to try and remove it, what we've done here is same again. You can see we've got the toe behind the ball to tighten the radius of the swing, and then your key thought now is to hit some big pulls. And for me, I'd do this as part of your warm-up routine every single time you practice, just to get it in there early, so you can see there's a difference in those hips. It doesn't work up quite as much, still works up, but not quite as much. And like I say, I mean, with a straighter right leg, that movement up wouldn't be as prevalent either, because the right hip would already be higher at P4. So you straighten the right leg. That in turn is going to raise the right hip, make the hips turn more on a tilted angle. It's going to facilitate a little bit more flexing of the left knee, that, like we can see over on the far right. So I like the right leg here. I just like the arm position better on the bottom one now, with the right knee straightening as much as we see here, and the left knee flexing as much as we see here. Your left arm would travel more, as would the shaft, as would the right arm, and before you know it, we've got a nice top of the backswing framework to work within. So I like what you're doing with your arms on the bottom right. I prefer what you're doing with your right leg on the top right, and I love what you're doing here on the bottom left with the radius of the swing. So if we can get a shorter P4 in the arms, so that we go looking to use the ground as a source of power, learn to get back into flexion by hitting some pulls and by tightening the radius of the swing. Remember what we said, if you hold on to accumulator 2 for as long as possible, you would have to get down and forward in the transition and get back into flexion just to reach the golf ball. So you'd have to flex forward, hip slide and extend and push up at the correct point just in order to get to the golf ball. If from the top of the backswing you start to flatten out the wrists, you have no option other than to push up off the ground very early. Otherwise you're going to run the risk of sticking the club in the ground about a foot behind the ball. So tightening the radius of the swing whilst hitting some pulls gives us a much better look at impact. Let's get rid of those lines than what we were seeing at the start of your session, where the right heel's popped up a little bit, the right knee's not got back into flexion, the head's angling back towards the camera, flying wedge has been lost. So it's just stuff to work on, like we said, all about using the ground better and controlling the rate at which we unload accumulator 2 during the downswing. Good luck with it, and I look forward to working with you again in a couple of weeks' time. Well done.